All right, everybody, welcome in to channel Black and Gold Breakdown. Thanks so much for watching. Yeah, Steelers quarterback. That's going to be the focal point of conversations around, not just Pittsburgh, but the fandom and the franchise for the foreseeable future until we reach the new league year. And the fact that there's so much speculation around, all right, who's it going to be? Who's going to be the quarterback? When are they going to bring them in? I mean, you'd assume it would be pretty quickly. It was similar to last year whenever, like, as soon as the clock struck midnight, whenever teams could start talking to people, Russell Wilson announced that he was going to be a Steeler. And then days later, they acquired Justin Fields. I would imagine it would be pretty quick. So today, I thought, all right, let's look at the options that are legit available that the Steelers could actually bring in, and what the pros are, what the cons are, the risks that are involved with all of them, because there are risks with all of them, and just what it can mean for 2025, depending on who they bring in. So that's what we're going to be doing today. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please make sure to do that. If you're listening to this as a podcast, be sure to leave a review. So let's start with Justin Fields, because it still feels like he's the most realistic name that will go into 2025 as the starter. It just makes sense to bring him back. Knows the system, and the 6 starts that he had last year, he played well. Wasn't lighting the world on fire, but they went 4-2. They were in each game that they lost. Very well could have won all 6 of his starts. And he's going to be cheap, so you can build, a really good offense around him and really give him the opportunity to show whether or not he's the guy or not. The risk with it, I guess, is that he just doesn't play well, which to me, I think Fields has the lowest level of risk, where, okay, he'll probably at most come in on a 2-year deal. Most of the money will be in that first year. And if he doesn't play to your liking in 2025, then you bring in somebody in 2026 in a really loaded quarterback class. Try to make a move for a guy to be the future. And in that case, if you played it smart in 2025, you already have a lot of weapons in place for whoever that next guy will be. So I think Fields has like the lowest amount of risk amongst all of their potential options, just because nobody's going to go into the season as a Steelers fan with Super Bowl expectations. Realistically speaking, the organization and all the players on the roster are going to be going into it with the goal of winning a championship, but fans aren't, they're not dumb for the most part. I mean, there's dumb fans in every fan base. But the smart fans know, okay, this isn't going to be a year to look forward to, a potential championship run. They're not going to be able to do that, at least in my opinion. This year is about finding the quarterback, or at least seeing if who you bring in can be the future. And Fields is really the only guy who you can bring in at this juncture who could be the long-term future. So with him, I think he has the least amount of risk associated with him. And there's upside there. 10 total touchdowns, only 1 pick in his 6 starts last year. Again, he wasn't a top 10 quarterback, but top 20 for sure. You can make the argument at his best he was, amongst, in that 15 to 17 group. So, I mean, he's a capable starter with dual threat abilities that fits the offense. And keeping him around And going into year 2 in the system, the locker room likes him. So I think that there's upside with it. And the risk is that, okay, he just doesn't play well, which you just move on in 2026 anyway. But the upside is, okay, he plays well and he's only 26. So we might have a guy that we can, at minimum be the short term or, somewhat of a, maybe like a 3-year deal like Baker Mayfield got with Tampa Bay. But it'll at least be the answer for the time being. And we know that we can win with him. That's the best case scenario. So Justin Fields, I think that those are the biggest pros and cons in terms of if they bring him back. Aaron Rodgers. Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. I talked a little bit about this. Was it yesterday? Where I don't think bringing in Aaron Rodgers would be the best idea just because he's 42. He's not gonna be somebody that I think if you bring in Aaron Rodgers, you're a team that is a contender who just feels like you're a quarterback away. Like you're a playoff team that just feels like you're a quarterback away. I don't know how many of those teams are really out there this year, and I don't think the Steelers are one of them if there are any out there like that this year. Like in a situation like a few years ago when Cleveland brought in Deshaun Watson, they felt like, okay, we can't quite do this with Baker Mayfield, so we'll go and get a guy who we view as, a top 5 quarterback who, at the time he was, obviously the baggage that came with him and that all blew up in the Browns' face, and that, that's good. But I don't think that there's really a team like that, similar to like when Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay. That was a good team that was put in place. They just were dealing with Jameis Winston at quarterback throwing 30 interceptions. And I don't know if there's a team quite like that out there. And I think that, if there is, are the Steelers that? Defensively, like we know about the stars that they have in place, but the defense fell apart down the stretch and was just not reliable. And so you're going to have to plug a few holes on that side of the ball. You're going to have to get multiple receivers and hope that Roger Jones plays well on the offensive line. I think Troy Fautanu will play well. But there's some questions there, and I just don't know if a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers is going to be the answer to those questions. Yeah, he played fine last year. I know the Jets didn't finish with a great record, but he played fine. Had a 28-11 touchdown interception ratio. That's pretty solid. He's no longer a top 5, top 10 quarterback, but he's probably in that 12 to 14 range. So you can certainly do worse than Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, he and Mike Tomlin like each other. So I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if he came in. I wouldn't be angry at it either. I know a lot of fans are completely just against the idea of Aaron Rodgers. If they're going to be, if this is just going to be another throwaway season, at least make it, interesting. If you're going to be just mediocre, at least be interesting and mediocre. You can't be boring and mediocre. Give me something. At this point, I'm just kind of rooting for the chaos. And I don't know if anybody else saw this, but there was, I think it's like a gym that posted this picture. Yeah, so it's Proactive Sports Performance. Posted a picture of Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Elliott working out together. This was posted 4 hours ago with the caption, "Who retires first?" And if you remember, Deshaun Elliott commented on a news thing on Instagram about Aaron Rodgers potentially being a Steeler and said, leave his ass at the retirement home. So at that picture and everything, Aaron's just pointing at Deshaun and Sean's giving 2 thumbs up. With context, maybe the whole leave his ass at the retirement thing was just a rib. And it's just a joke. So maybe Deshaun Elliott knows something that we don't know. And maybe Aaron Rodgers is a, truly realistic option for the Steelers to bring in. And again, if he is I don't dislike Aaron. I wrote something that he's kind of like an egomaniac, which I think he kind of is. But I don't dislike him. He might have some wacky ideas, but I don't have anything against Aaron. But let's talk about the pros. The pros is that he's still a capable starting quarterback. He's still in the upper half of starters in the NFL. 4-time MVP. He's smart. Even as he ages, you don't lose, the brain power when you're a 4-time MVP. So in terms of just the smarts that he has, that hasn't gone away. Another pro would be if he comes to Pittsburgh, Davante Adams would probably want to follow. And if you can get Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, and George Pickens, the thought of that potentially blowing up is very funny. Just because we know, George Pickens has had his fair share of, bad looks on the field. We know that Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, and Davante Adams can, have the tendency to be a little bit of, diva-ish somewhat. Maybe not. Maybe that's unfair to Davante Adams. But I think the fact that he very much wants to play with Aaron, that's the whole reason why he, went to the Jets to begin with. So if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers, I'm sure Davante Adams wouldn't mind following. And I'm on board with getting Davante Adams in Pittsburgh. That would be great. So those are the biggest pros for those two. Or I guess for Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, is that you get Davante Adams. And the fact that he's still an upper half of the league starter. He's not 16 or below. He's 16 or above. I think he's probably right around 14 to 13. I don't know. I'd have to list them all out to see where he lands. But if I had to guess, it'll be between 12 and 14. And the cons are, well, it's Aaron Rodgers. There's going to be some bit of melodrama that comes with him. But you kind of knew that about Russell Wilson, too, and you still brought him in. And Aaron Rodgers is better than Russell Wilson. And sometimes, I think the Steelers especially, and maybe I'm going to talk myself into Aaron Rodgers, but sometimes you just need somebody to be a little bit of a prick. They don't have that in Pittsburgh. They don't have just a dude who is an asshole when he needs to be. And it shows up when they lose every big game and get blown out by every good team. If anything, they need a little bit of a douche on their team. So maybe Aaron Rodgers wouldn't be the worst idea. It'd probably only be a 1-year deal because I don't think he's going to play past this year. And maybe he just all out retires before free agency anyway. We'll see. But if he does play, I do think it would only be for a year. So that's the con of that, is that you're signing up for another 1-year stopgap type thing and then going into 2026 with more uncertainty. Matthew Stafford, probably the least likely of them. It's possible that a trade gets conducted between the Steelers and the Rams. I don't think it's a 0% chance that happens, but I would say that Fields and Rodgers are probably more likely just because they're cheaper and the Steelers, they're a cheap team. And, if you don't have to give up anything to get them, then that's probably the route that they would go. It's not the route I would go personally, but just putting myself in the shoes of how this team operates, I would guess that they would look at Stafford as, okay, well, we don't have to give up anything to get Justin Fields or Aaron Rodgers, so we'd rather do that. But with Stafford, the pros are he's still a legit top 10 guy in the league, and that would be a great acquisition for the Steelers. The con is that, again, you don't know how much longer he's going to play. So that's something that you'd have to take into consideration. I think that you'd have to get pretty big confirmation from himself where he's like, yeah, I plan on playing for quite a while longer. rather than giving up, a couple second round picks for a guy who's only going to be there for a year. And on top of that, again, you'd have to really commit to getting more weapons because Matthew Stafford and George Pickens, they're both really good, but it can't be all you have. So you'd have to really commit to getting a number 2 receiver that's good, getting a third receiver that's good. There's a lot of things that the Steelers really have to commit to doing. And look, the answer long-term for them might not be in this class, or might not come this year. Certainly not going to come in this draft class. They're not going to take at least I don't think they will. Maybe they surprise everybody and take Jackson Dart. But then maybe that's if they do get a older vet, if they do sign Rodgers, maybe they bring in Dart as well and say, all right, we'll have a quarterback on the roster who will, get a chance to start when Aaron Rodgers retires. Similar to what the Packers did with Jordan Love. Do I think that Jackson Dart is going to turn out like Jordan Love? I do not. But I would love to be proven wrong if he is drafted. I also won't have a problem with the Steelers if they do draft Jackson Dart. If they do it in the first round, I'll have a problem. But if they took him in the third round, all right, whatever. I understand why you did it. But I certainly don't think they're taking a quarterback in the first round. I'd be very shocked if that happened. So, I guess we can transition into Jackson Dart. I don't think a rookie's going to start for this team this year. It will be a vet of some sort. And if I had to guess, it would be one of either Justin Fields or Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Russell Wilson's coming back. I think that ship has sailed. Any sort of reports you see from Schefter saying, oh, Russell Wilson still thinks he'll maybe have a return to Pittsburgh, that is 100% coming from Russell Wilson's camp to try to drive up his price. Russell Wilson won't be back in Pittsburgh. So I'm completely I don't even look at Russell Wilson as an option because I'm very, very 99.9% sure he's not going to be back. And again, any reports you see, he's like, oh, well, Russell Wilson still thinks he could, get a new deal from the Steelers. That is Russell Wilson's camp trying to get the New York Giants to give him a little bit more money. That is all that is. And if they would bring back Russell Wilson, that would be the most disappointing result of any of the possibilities. That would be the most disappointing because we just saw what that looks like. You didn't make any changes to the coaching staff. You didn't make any sort of, personnel changes. And you're bringing back the quarterback that just lost the last 5 games of the year. What are you doing? So if they just completely run it back with basically the same core of guys and Russell Wilson, why would fans have any reason to be invested in 2025? They wouldn't. Because we just saw how this movie ends. Be like going to see a movie in the movie theater, and then right after the first showing ends, you stick around and watch the next showing and go, all right, I wonder how this is going to go. No, we know how that's going to go. They'll probably win 9-10 games, back into the playoffs if they get in at all, and then get the hell beat out of them by Buffalo, Kansas City, or Cincinnati, or Baltimore. That's what'll happen. So I'd like to see somebody new. I guess Justin Fields isn't technically new, but they pulled him in favor of Russell Wilson, and I would rather see Justin Fields with a full year of being the unquestioned starter than running it back with Russell Wilson where we know what that's going to look like. So hopefully they don't bring back Russell Wilson. That would be disappointing to me. I know that's not what I want to see. And in terms of the rookies, like I said, if they do take a rookie, it'll be late day 2 or day 3. Maybe they take the Tyler Show kid from Louisville. I don't think that he'll be a future starter, though. I think if you take him, that's, the best hope for him is to be a good backup. But I don't think he's going to go into 2025 with expectations of being the starter. If they were to take Jalen Milroe on like day 3, like, guys, I watched Jalen Milroe. Not just at Alabama, but at the Senior Bowl. He wasn't good. And he wasn't very good this past year at Alabama. Like, I understand he's a dual threat and he can run all over the place. That's great. Like, that's not an NFL quarterback. So I would hope that they recognize that and don't entertain it. Who else is in this class? Dylan Gabriel, no. Like any of like the rookies past like the notable names, like I just don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna take anybody in this class with thoughts of them being a future starter. Like I said, if they take the Tyler Show kid from Louisville, I think that's with the thought of, okay, he can be a good backup. We'll take him in the 7th. But the big issue with this year is that the quarterback class isn't good. So you're going to have to really rely on a veteran to really try to see if they can be the future. And the only one that really makes sense to see if they're going to be the future is Justin Fields. Saw some people say Sam Darnold. I like Sam. Like, I was one of the last people on the Sam Darnold train when he was in Carolina. But I think the last few weeks in Minnesota kind of highlighted that Sam Darnold has like a very hard ceiling. And he can be successful with a very good offense put in place, a very good offensive coach, good weapons. But the Steelers don't have a very good offensive coach, a good offense, or good weapons. So I just don't think Sam Darnold would succeed in Pittsburgh. That's a move that doesn't make sense to me personally. I think that he could go somewhere like Los Angeles and succeed because he would have Sean McVay, Puka Nacua. They'd probably make another move for a receiver. They got a good run game. So I think he could succeed there. The same reasons that he succeeded in Minnesota. He had Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, a good run game with Aaron Jones. And by the way, a really good defense too. So I think if he's one of those guys where if everything around him is perfect, then he can have some success. But if things aren't, as perfect as they possibly can be, then he's going to struggle. So I don't think Sam Darnold to the Steelers makes any sort of sense. Now, a couple years ago, I would have been completely on board with that. But, I think that we saw that there's a very hard ceiling on the Sam Darnold experience. Even with the best offensive coach and the best offensive weapons and the best defense, like that thing has a low ceiling. You can go 14-3 in the regular season, but you're going to lose wild card weekend. So I'm out on Sam Darnold. Who else is there? Derek Carr. I'm good. I wouldn't be completely flabbergasted if they brought in Derek Carr, because to his credit, the first 2 weeks of the year, the Saints put up north of 40 points in both those games, and Derek Carr looked really good. And then, unfortunately, he got hurt. Derek Carr would fit in so well in Pittsburgh too. He just looks like a Western Pennsylvanian. I don't know. Maybe I could talk myself into Derek Carr. I'm not talking myself into them being super duper successful with Derek Carr, but I could talk myself into them winning 10 games with Derek Carr and then losing in the wild card round. It's nothing different than what they've done in the past 8 years. They would have to get him via a release though from New Orleans, because I'm pretty sure the money that he's due this offseason, it's not like he's cheap. So that would be something that is off-putting to me. If he was a free agent, it would be a different story, but I do believe that it would have to be via trade. And how much money is Derek Carr owed this season? Let's find out. Derek Carr's 2025 cap hit is $51.4 million. That is a big fat no from me. His base salary is $30 million. So, the Saints would be on the hook for, $50 million in dead money if they were to trade him. But yeah, I'm okay on that. Kirk Cousins is another guy. He's probably just going to get all out released by the Falcons. That's another one where I'm I'm good. I like Kirk, but he did not play well in Atlanta, and I don't think that there's going to be a much better offense put in place in Pittsburgh for him to succeed. He can't really move anymore because of the Achilles injury, so I'm good on Kirk Cousins. It's not a whole lot of pros there with me with Kirk. I mean, he's old. He didn't play well last year. He's a nice guy. That's one of the pros, maybe. But I think that the things he does well, the Steelers don't do well, which is a lot of, the play action passing over the middle. The Steelers didn't do a whole lot of that. They did a lot of play action deep bombs. So I'm out on Kirk. He can maybe go to like Tennessee and be their quarterback, but I don't think that he would succeed in Pittsburgh. So there's one that could be interesting, and that's Geno Smith. I know there's a lot of like all the film guys love Geno. I don't dislike Geno. I think that he gets a wee bit overrated because people will put a thing on Twitter of like a little, a video of him throwing a really nice deep ball or, one pass from a game where he threads the needle into a tight window. And that's all well and good. But like Geno Smith is still Geno Smith. Like at maximum, he's, the 12th, 13th best quarterback in football who's going to have a few games a year where you're just like, oh my God. So Geno Smith gets a little bit overrated, and he also has a ton of red zone turnovers. So it's not a move I would hate by any means. Like, I'd be like, all right, it's better than what you had. But I don't think that it would raise the Steelers' ceiling tremendously. I think they could win a wild card game with them, but that's about it. And right now, you know what? I think that's all Steelers fans are really hoping for this year is, all right, just win a playoff game, please. At least that's all I'm hoping for. That's my realistic, like, super duper goal is just get to the playoffs and win a playoff game. Can you do that? Because we've been waiting 8 years for you to do it and you haven't done it. So if you get a guy like Geno Smith, yeah, you'd be able to maybe win a wild card game, and that would be all well and good. But I don't think that he would be a good long-term answer if you're trying to win deep into January. So I think the two that make the most sense are Justin Fields because of the reasons I've pointed out multiple times on this show and other shows. If he plays well, he's 26, then you have a potential quarterback for the future. If he stinks, then hopefully you were smart this offseason and added a lot of weapons around him and have those weapons in place for whoever you draft in 2026. And Aaron Rodgers, just because, like, all right, if you're going to be mediocre, at least be mediocre and interesting. We'll have Rodgers going on McAfee every Tuesday after a loss. He's talking about how selfish George Pickens is. Just give us crazy headlines every week. That's at least make my job interesting. Because that would be lovely. Maybe that's it. Like, selfishly, I know that Behind the Steel Curtain would do tons of good numbers because Aaron Rodgers inevitably will do some crazy stuff or say some crazy thing that everybody's talking about, and I'll be able to have the website doing good numbers. So selfishly, maybe I want Aaron Rodgers to come to Pittsburgh a little bit. And like I said, I like Aaron. So, being at minicamp and OTAs would be fun. Talk to him a little bit. I think that'd be pretty fun for me. This is all very selfish reasons of why I'd want him to come to Pittsburgh. But realistically, like, you're not going to find much better than him on the open market this year. You're just not. I don't think that Geno Smith is a much better signing, if better at all. Sam Darnold isn't. Kirk Cousins isn't. So I think it'll end up being Fields or Rodgers, one of those two. And then whoever it is, both of them will be cheap. You could probably sign Rodgers to like a $4 million deal. Maybe even the vet minimum. Which would be exactly what they did for Russ last year, is 1.2. And if you do that, then all right, great. You have a lot of money. Go get people. Spend the money. Get weapons that are actual weapons. No more running it back with Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller. Go get weapons that are good. And improve on the defensive side of the ball where you got to improve. Cornerback, get another defensive lineman. Like, if you have the money, spend it. And the Steelers are like annoyingly cheap when it comes to doing stuff like that. So hopefully they open the checkbook a little bit for whoever the quarterback is. But yeah, this is obviously quite the dilemma that they find themselves in, being in quarterback purgatory for the second consecutive year, not having a starting quarterback on the roster. They're going to have to figure it out. Like I said, I think it'll end up being Fields, just because that makes the most sense. And if it's not Fields, I think it'll be Rodgers, which I will also be fine with, because they'll win 10 games with Aaron. And if you know what, if you get into the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers, I would look at that and be like, all right, I mean, you got Aaron Rodgers in a playoff game, so that's kind of exciting. Especially if they play like an AFC South team. Like, even if it's the Texans again, the Texans will be favored to win, and rightfully so, but I wouldn't be like completely shocked if the Steelers beat them. Or if like the Jaguars get back on track and they play Jacksonville in Jacksonville, I'm like, all right, they can win this game. So if you get to the playoffs, just win. Obviously, we got a long time, so then we got 11 months until we're talking about playoff football again. But the Steelers are in a weird spot because they're always going to try to be competitive. Like, they're never going to be, at least not with Tomlin, they're never going to be in a spot where they're just going to tank. Even if they should. Like, quite frankly, they probably should this year. Smart business would be trading Cam Hayward for draft picks, trading TJ Watt for draft picks, trading Minkah Fitzpatrick for draft picks, stinking it up in 2025, having a ton of picks to build for the future and find your quarterback, and then going from there, rather than going 9-8 or 10-7, losing in the wild card round, and then if you want a quarterback to draft next year, having to trade up to do it. But we'll see. As always, we'll see. I say that a lot. But the new league year, again, starts in 3 weeks. It's when the legal tampering period begins, and they can start cutting deals with free agents and making moves and making trades. So we'll find out. We will find out. We're going to find out right around then, because they can't afford to wait. So in about 3 weeks, we'll know. I'll be at the NFL Combine next week in Indianapolis, so be sure to subscribe to the channel for on-site videos from Indy. I'll be at Omar Khan's presser. I'll be at a lot of pressers. I'll be at a lot of podiums for players, so I'll be posting clips of that. So if you want a lot of on-site coverage from the NFL Combine, subscribe to the channel, and I appreciate it. Be back later on in the week to continue talking Steelers, NFL, everything going on. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. As always, I'll talk to you soon.